So right after that dramatic U.S. military operation in Venezuela, it looks like the Trump administration is now looking north, way north. Is Washington seriously eyeing Greenland next? Today, we're going to break down exactly why this massive, ice-covered island has suddenly become such a critical focus of American foreign policy. And it really kicked off with this, wow, incredibly blunt statement from the State Department, which came out right after the operation in Venezuela. Look, this wasn't just some random comment. It was a very clear signal of a much broader, much more aggressive foreign policy taking shape, a policy that would very soon turn its attention to the Arctic.
Well, this new approach, it actually has a name, the Monroe Doctrine. Basically, you can think of it as the old Monroe Doctrine on steroids for the 21st century. The goal is pretty much the same, reassert American dominance in its own hemisphere. But this time, the big focus is on pushing back hard against the influence of rivals like China and Russia.
And if you thought this was all just going to be about talking and diplomacy, well, the White House made things crystal clear. The threat of military force, not against some enemy, but against the territory of Denmark, a NATO ally, that sent absolute shockwaves around the world. And immediately begged the question, what in the world is so important about Greenland? Okay, so that gets us right to the heart of it all. This is way more than just some large real estate deal, as it was once famously called. Greenland is now seen as the absolute keystone to the entire Arctic region, and its value is just skyrocketing for reasons that have very little to do with its icy surface. All right, so let's just ask the big question. Why? Why this massive, remote, ice-covered island? And the answer? It's really this potent mix of geography, geology, and of course, geopolitics. First things first, you just gotta look at a map. Greenland has this incredible rooftop position, sitting right there at the strategic center of the Arctic, overlooking North America, Europe, and Russia. And here's the kicker. As the Arctic ice melts due to climate change, this place is going from a frozen, remote backwater to a critical global crossroads. So let's break that strategic value down a bit, shall we? You've got the Patuxent Space Base, which is the northernmost U.S. military base. It's like America's eye in the sky for missile warnings. It also anchors what's called the GI-UK gap, the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, which is a super important naval choke point for keeping tabs on Russian submarines. And then there's the future. As that ice disappears, new shipping lanes are opening up that could completely change global trade, and Greenland is sitting right there, like a gatekeeper. But its strategic spot on the map? That's really only half the story. The other half is all about what's under the ice, a literal treasure trove of resources that are absolutely critical for the 21st century economy and military. 1.5 million tons. That's the estimated reserve of what they call rare earth elements, or REEs, just waiting in Greenland. That's enough to make it the 8th largest deposit in the entire world. Now, that's not just some number in a geology textbook. That's a number that could completely shake up the global power balance when it comes to critical minerals. So why the big deal about these minerals? Well, they're basically the secret sauce in almost all modern high-tech stuff. We're talking about everything from the smartphone in your pocket to electric cars, and even to something as advanced as an F-35 fighter jet. They all need these elements. Without a steady supply, whole industries could just grind to a halt. And this is the really crucial part. Right now, China has a stranglehold on this market. They dominate not just the mining, but more importantly, the processing of these elements. For Washington, from a national security point of view, that's a massive, massive vulnerability. Greenland is seen as the single best shot at breaking that dependence and creating a secure supply chain controlled by the West. Okay, so that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If there's so much potential, why isn't Greenland already a mining superpower, just shipping this stuff out to the world? Well, as it turns out, the reality on the ground is a whole lot messier than the potential in the ground. The challenges here are just huge. The environment is incredibly harsh, for starters. But the even bigger issue is that there's basically no infrastructure. Get this. The whole island, it's 3 times the size of Texas, has only 93 miles of paved roads, total. But honestly, the biggest roadblock of all? It's political. In 2021, an election that was basically all about mining put a new government in power that bans uranium mining. And since the rare earths at the biggest proposed site, Kavana Field, are mixed in with uranium, that decision effectively shut the whole project down. And that really brings us to what might be the single biggest hurdle of them all. One that isn't about logistics or geology, but is about something deeply human and political. It's about the people who actually call Greenland home. The response from Greenland's leaders whenever this comes up, it's been crystal clear and immediate. This quote from the Prime Minister says it all. It's a powerful declaration of self-determination, one that's based on a long history and a very unique legal status.
And look, this isn't just them talking tough. This is actually backed by law. The 2009 Self-Government Act officially recognizes Greenlanders as their own distinct people under international law. And that gives them the legal, fundamental right to decide their own future, which includes the right to declare full independence if they want to.
Okay, so what would it actually legally take for the U.S. to acquire Greenland? Well, it's basically a three-step process, and believe me, each step is like climbing a mountain. First, and most importantly, the people of Greenland themselves would have to say yes, probably in a referendum. Then, Denmark would have to agree. And finally, the U.S. Senate would have to ratify the whole thing with a two-thirds vote. So while there's a legal path, politically, that first step makes it a near impossibility. So, with consent clearly not happening, all this tough talk from Washington creates a much bigger problem, one that goes way beyond Greenland. It starts to shake the very foundations of the entire NATO alliance, the bedrock of U.S. security for more than 75 years. I mean, listen to this quote from the Danish Prime Minister. That is not some polite diplomatic language. It's a dead serious, existential warning. The very idea of one NATO country using military threats to grab territory from another NATO country is so completely against what the alliance is for that it could literally cause the whole thing to just stop. And that's the core problem right there, the fundamental contradiction. NATO was built on one simple idea. An attack on one is an attack on all. For the most powerful member of that alliance to even hint at using military force to take an ally's land, it just flips the whole idea of collective defense completely on its head. At the end of the day, this whole situation really boils down to a clash between two totally different ways of seeing the world. Is global stability something we maintain through cooperation and international law? Or is it a world where the rules are just, optional if you're powerful enough? And so that leaves us with one final huge question. As the Arctic ice continues to melt and the region opens up, its future is still being written. So is its future going to be written through cooperation or through coercion? What happens with Greenland could very well decide the answer.